Take a knee.
Stand. Everyone knows what to do. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So first candidate tonight is Mr. Curtin. And so we have just a series of questions we'll all answer and maybe be some follow-up. And as Becky said earlier, this is being both taped and live broadcast to some of the cable customers in town. And other than that, just you know, if you have any questions for us, just ask us and we'll answer your questions, and we'll probably have a bunch of questions for you too. So the first two questions are one. Just please take a moment and introduce yourself to us and everybody in the room. And then the follow-up to that on the same question is, what made you make the decision to apply for the town administrator's position in Maynard? And why do you believe you are the best candidate for the open position?
Hi, I'm Bob Curtin. I'm currently the assistant to the town administrator in the town of Linfield. I am going to have a title change within the month to assistant town administrator. And, excuse me. And I've been there for 9 years. Before that, for 25 years, I worked in the publishing field. I was the editor of the local newspaper in both Linfield and Peabody. I'm a Peabody resident, and I decided to apply here in Maynard because it's a town similar to Linfield in size. It's, after reviewing some of your online materials and talking to a few people, I think it's a community that's in good shape, and it's a place where someone can succeed because the town itself provides the means to do so. I've worked in town government now for 9 years, and I feel ready for this next step to move up to the position of town administrator.
Okay. Anybody have any follow-up questions?
So for last 7 years, you've been involved in town government? That's what
9 years
9
working in town government. Before that, covering it as a reporter and an editor for 25 years.
Gotcha. From 2000, I'm just gonna make sure, 2009 to present, you were the assistant to the administration?
That's right.
Akin to what, assistant town administrator, is that what that is?
That's right. There is no position underneath the town administrator. It's a two-person office.
Thank you.
Can I quickly just get a little insight? What led to your decision to leave publishing or newspaper work and going into public service?
There were a couple of things. The newspaper industry, as most people know, its glory days are in the past. It's gone through a rough patch. But I spent 25 years learning about local government by being at these meetings, writing them up for the paper, getting an understanding of the community, about how municipal government works, how it interfaces with state government. And after a while, you stand on the sidelines long enough, you want to get out there on the ball field and see if you can, take the bat in your hands and have a few swings at things. I'm less passive than active in terms of my approach to things. And after I had demonstrated some expertise, I was encouraged to apply, and it seemed like a natural fit. It was a new challenge, and it was something that I really thought I was quite ready to do.
And how big is the city of, or the town of Linfield?
Linfield is about 12,000 people.
Okay.
So am I correct in reading, I'm sorry, from your resume that so there was a period of, when you were interim town administrator, is there?
That's right.
Okay.
I spent about 6 weeks as interim town administrator, and it was a busy 6 weeks. And during the, we have a new town administrator now, and I spent, quite a bit of time getting him up to speed. But I enjoyed it. I felt, even though it was not something that was sustainable as a one-person office for very long, I certainly enjoyed the challenges, and it was a natural fit, and I thought it worked out very well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. The next question is, there's a natural tension between owning the day-to-day operations of the town as the town administrator and deferring to the priorities, guidance, and direction of the Board of Selectmen. Please tell us how you would approach this tension and provide any examples, if you can, of how you've navigated a similar dynamic in the past.
Well, I've been able to observe during my time as assistant town administrator and previously to that as a newspaper editor and reporter, a number of town administrators. We also had a Wakefield edition. And it's always important as the town administrator to see yourself as the person who does the implementation, who offers the options, and never lose sight of the fact you are implementing the board's vision and the board's direction. The day-to-day activities, boards of selectmen don't want to micromanage in general. They want you to take care of the day-to-day, but they want to be informed of what's going on in case they feel the need to weigh in. So I think the most important thing here is communication. I feel very strongly in my current position, and certainly when I was interim town administrator, to make sure the board was fully apprised of everything that was going on in town. That doesn't mean I was asking them to tell me what to do about every little thing. But still, as people who are at the gas station, who might be in the pickup line at the school, who are on the fields, who are out shopping, the last thing you want to leave your board in the position of is someone raising an issue with them and you have to say, I don't know anything about it. So communication, I think, is the key to making sure that you understand, that the board understands what's going on and therefore can weigh in when appropriate. And there's many ways of doing it by phone call. I instituted a bi-weekly update with just some notes that I would send to the entire board saying, here's what's going on this week. Sometimes it's something as simple as someone in town hall, they had a relative die, so the board would want to know that. And of course, the more pressing issues. But the important thing is that it's not your vision of the town that prevails, it's the board's vision. They're the residents here. They have the background. The voters chose them to represent them. And what you do is you offer options, recommendations when asked, and implement the board's vision and policies. I think one good way to do it is to have the board drop a list of annual goals. The town administrator should not develop goals that are independent of these goals, but goals that would go hand in hand with these goals that naturally evolve from the board's goals, and then work with department heads to have goals that feed from both the board's goals and the town administrator's goals. That way, there's a clear understanding of what you're going to do, what you intend to do. You can be evaluated fairly on it. And of course, things change. In municipal government, things are very fluent, so goals might have to be adjusted. You might be forced to set your vision elsewhere because of some pressing matter. But it's good to have a game plan, and it's good to make sure that everyone's in the same boat, paddling in the same direction.
Can you think of an example in your time with the town of Linfield where there was kind of a tension there, where, you know, either yourself or the town administrator that you were supporting and the board maybe had a different sense of priorities, or where you felt like the communication may have broken down? And could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
I will, without speaking in specifics,
Yeah.
because I had good working relations with all these people, but there is sometimes a different view of how much control the board should have over the day-to-day and how much should be left to the town administrator. We had a veteran town administrator who come from another community who was used to having a very hands-off board. Mm-hmm. Linfield's boards over the years have fluctuated. There are some selectmen who just want to set broad policy, want you to handle the day-to-day. They're not all that interested in what's happening necessarily on a minute basis. And there are other boards that want to be very active in that. But again, I felt the town administrator at the time and the board were not on the same page in terms of the board getting updates on its goals. And so what was implemented, and it was resisted at first, but I think now that there's an understanding works for everyone, we actually have something we post on the website about all the goals and programs and issues, and we update it regularly, not only adding and taking things off as you complete them, but we post what's been done, the last time there was activity, what the latest activity was going towards the goal. You have a lot of things in town government, a lot of balls in the air. And even though you know you're working on them incrementally, sometimes the board doesn't see it and the public doesn't see it. And I think this has become a very handy way to make sure the public can see, oh yes, we're dealing with that property we're trying to sell. Here's why no activity's happening. We're waiting for either a legal opinion or we're waiting for an environmental test. The next time something will happen is at a hearing before this board. You can look online, and the board, I think, even though not much changed in terms of how much work was happening on these things, there was a comfort level that was achieved by having this update that was available to the public and available to the board on a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, I noticed when I was looking over the Linfield website earlier that the goals were listed, but that's an interesting element of doing the, kind of using the website that way as a way of updating as well.
Anybody else have any follow-up?
Yeah, one follow-up. So on the cusp of talking about the board being more involved with the day-to-day operations, I'll give you a hypothetical example. A board member or multiple board members come to the town administrator with reports of dissatisfaction with the job performance or interaction with town of a department head or an employee here. How do you handle that? Is that something that the board should not be involved in, or from a town administrator perspective, what's your experience with how that may have been handled in the past, and how would you handle it here?
Well, there are department heads that report and are appointed by the board, who have contracts with the board. There are department heads who are subordinate to the town administrator. And so but in both cases, if there's a problem that a resident has with a department head as town administrator, you want to know. So if a selectman or multiple selectmen have an issue with performance of a department head, that's certainly something as a town administrator you want to know. And because there's acting through your town administrator and your department heads, that's how you accomplish your goals. So I would take that very seriously. One thing is you'd have an evaluation process that through the end of the year you decide if there's a contract, whether you want to renew it. If there's a pressing issue, the first thing I would do is call the department head up and say, I'm hearing some trouble about this and what's happening. If the selectmen wish to have the department head know, hey, I'm hearing from a board member that we're having a problem. But the first thing is the communication. You bring the department head in. If it's a serious issue, something that requires, let's say something of an ethical, legal nature, that's something you involve counsel in right away. If it's a performance issue, most of the time it's expectations, knowing that this is a problem, let's get on it, how long will it take, and getting back to the board. Here's the plan. I've spoken to the department head, here's what he or she intends to do to correct it. Is this something you feel is something that's acceptable? If not, then you bring the matter before the board in public if necessary, if it's a great performance issue. But usually, department heads want to do a good job. They want to please the board, no less than the town administrator does. And usually just telling them it's a matter of focus, you have to focus on this, will be sufficient. If it's an ongoing problem, that there's ongoing problems with this type of issue, then you have to bring them in for counseling. You have to, if they're a good employee otherwise, you have to send them sometimes for training in that specific area. We had an outstanding department head once who was weak in his interaction with subordinates. So we sent him for training on that. So you were able to upgrade an area of the department head's performance and keep the things he was outstanding at, which was budgeting, procurement, long-range strategic thinking. And by everyone having the same goals and expectations, you manage a lot of that. But certainly, if a selectman calls with a problem, that becomes a priority in the town administrator's office, and it should become a priority in the department. Okay,
thank you for your answer. Just one small follow-up to that. So would it be fair to say that personnel issues wouldn't be something you'd be delegating to a subordinate. That would be something that you'd be handling as a town administrator yourself.
It depends the type of personnel issue, but if it's a performance issue, yes, if there's someone, obviously if it's a superintendent or if it's a library director has a board that they report to, you have to work in concert. The superintendent's handled by the school committee. But a town department, I think so, yes.
Okay. No, thank you. Appreciate the thoroughness.
Anybody else? Okay, Cheryl, the next two questions are yours.
Okey dokey. So Maynard as a community has an admittedly high tax base, and our size limits our new growth potential. These factors, as well as the constant reduction in state funding, contribute to an annual struggle to retain full services while balancing our budget. What financial strategies would you employ to retain high service levels while maintaining a balanced budget?
There are a few ways to attack this, I think. One is to work hand in hand with your business community and your business property owners to maximize your commercial tax base and tax revenue. I notice you're in the midst of a master plan, drawing up a new master plan. I imagine that will be a major focus. And therefore, you work to, once the master plan is drawn up, you work to implement that plan along with other town boards, committees, and departments. So that's the thing, to bake the pie, don't limit yourself to the size of the current pie. See if you can bake a bigger pie where it's appropriate. If there are vacancies in rentals, I think the town can help by marketing not the property but the town itself. I think one thing to do is work with businesses to market Maynard as a place that's good to work in, good to own a business in. The other way to do it is by looking very hard at your priorities and your goals and looking at where you're spending money and empowering your department heads to find ways to save money without costing service. Sometimes it's getting a little more aggressive about bidding, things that you aren't required necessarily to bid by state law. Sometimes you get used to using the same vendor and they start to take you for granted. Taking a hard look at those things, the major things, which are the health insurance, various insurances, offering incentives to employees to find savings either by recognizing them or creating some incentive program. You want every employee to feel very strongly that they are as careful with the town's money as they would be with their own, maybe even more so, because it's not your money to spend. And I find that when you ask people, hey, we really have to sharpen our pencils, and get aggressive with your questions, not aggressive with them personally, but aggressive with the questions, how can we save money here? Do we really need to do this? Is this program still working? Is there a better way of attacking this? You can find some savings. And it's not an easy process, but it's fruitful, and you want people to have that mindset that we're always looking to make sure that every penny we spend is spent in the most efficient manner.
Any follow-ups from the board?
The only thing I would follow up on is, as you alluded to, commercial development is a necessary way to bring in new revenue streams, especially in a town like this where there's limited other options hitting our tax ceiling. How do you balance the need for new development and the residents who might be resisting such development coming into town in their backyard?
That's a tough one. That's one of the toughest issues I think any municipality faces. My father, when I was a young boy, he taught a course. He was a teacher, later became an administrator. He taught a course on problems of democracy. He said the best area he taught was, where do we put the dump? So commercial development is far easier to deal with than the dump. But I will give you an example in Linfield. Linfield had 3 golf courses. It wasn't really sustainable. One of the golf courses decided they wanted to sell. Now, this could have gone in many directions. The town got aggressively involved in speaking to the landowner about what the town would like to see. And then when a developer was found, the town worked hand in hand to make sure the development was going to be a Class A development, and also would handle a couple of the issues, not only broadening the town's commercial tax base. If you know Linfield at all, it's got a very limited tax base along Route 1. Route 128 is really, there's no tax base off it. There are small little areas in the town center and in what we call Post Office Square. So the town had two major issues: needing to expand its commercial tax base to support its services, and needing to meet its 40B requirement, because we were being deluged at the time with small 40Bs that were very disruptive to neighborhoods. And if you look at 40B, you realize you're not going to get there through ownership units unless you have many, many 40Bs scattered around your town. So we worked with a developer who had bought the golf course to build a combination of office space, retail space, and apartments that, with another apartment building on Route 1, allowed the town to go from nowhere near meeting 40B to completely satisfying our 40B requirements. We also more than doubled our commercial tax base. And there was resistance from the neighbors. There is still neighbors after it's built out, and most people would say it's one of the most outstanding commercial mixed-use developments in eastern Massachusetts. There are still some neighbors who are put out by it. We have an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen that deals with issues related solely to this development, because a lot of things come up, and you plan and you plan. Here's one example of things we didn't think about. We had all kinds of rules about when you can have deliveries, where traffic can come in and come out. But the biggest complaint we have now is that when they plow snow in the night and they back up the trucks, they beep. No one thought about the beeping. And we told them they can't disable it. It's a safety thing. But we became aware of it. We worked with the developer. Okay, can you try to have them minimize the backing up whenever possible? They have to circle around a little, have them do that. It's small things, but it's important to someone who's got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they're hearing incessant beeping at 3:30 in the morning. And so taking care of these small complaints, some of it can't be helped. Yes, the traffic gets busy during Christmas week. We get a lot of calls. We ask people to be patient. We tell them, this will all be gone in 4 or 5 days, please be patient, allow a little extra time. Fortunately, as with most things, the neighbors are more concerned about it before it happens, or more upset than when it has happened, because usually the fear of the unknown comes in. A lot of the neighbors are still calling us about things they'd like to have adjusted, but with a good working relationship that we have with both the neighbors and the project management team there, the development management team, we've been able to take care of a lot of the little things. And most of the, if not all the neighbors will admit, it was a good project. They would have rather had a golf course there, but understanding that the town didn't own the land, the town didn't have the wherewithal to buy the land, they would agree it was managed about as well as could be managed.
Is that 6 years old? 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, it's about 6 years old.
As I mentioned, I work less than a mile away.
Right, so you know
I know it exactly.
the back road in there.
I certainly do.
So the next question that we have is, recently the Board of Selectmen unveiled a strategy for a more disciplined approach to budgeting and financial planning that would help us set aside money for capital projects, and which will require a high degree of discipline and restraint in the face of budgetary needs and asks. Do you have any thoughts on that proposed strategy, or some of the challenges the town might face in maintaining the approach, and how might you navigate the process? There's a follow-up to that about, in terms of when in navigating the process, who might you invite into it, schools, other departments, et cetera?
I think you have to work closely with not only the board, but the finance committee. Or I don't know, do you call it the advisory committee here, or the?
Finance committee.
Yeah, the finance committee. They can do a very good job for you in helping focus people on the bottom line. It's another step in the process, and if you include them early, they can weigh in more forcefully. A lot of times I've seen communities the budget gets all worked out between the town administrator and the department heads, and is handed to the finance committee late as kind of a fait accompli. Now, we've spent a lot of time on this, please go along. I think that's a bad approach. It's something that's natural, because you have finally got the board all together to look at the budget the way you want, them to, you've got them all in agreement, here's an approach. You've got department heads who are willing to, yes, okay, I can accept that you've cut me here. And then you give it to a whole new group that starts the questions from the beginning. I've seen communities try to kind of placate the finance committee, try to tamp that process down. I think having an active finance committee as a financial watchdog is the best friend the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator can have. But I think another way of doing this is building a team of your department heads, having them meet frequently with the town administrator, so they don't see they have a group of problems and I'm competing with these other people. If you have regular meetings where they share strategies, they share what they need to do, then it's easier to sit down, especially when you're doing, let's say, a capital budget, and you have to fit it under a certain amount of money. And everyone is advocating, as they should, for their department. Sometimes you sit around the table and you say, can that wait till next year? And if the other department heads are there for the last kind of go-around through it, and they're working as a team, they'll say, yeah, I understand. Okay, I see he needs that. I've heard that for 2 years that he's been looking for. Yeah, I can probably push mine off for a year. So I think that's the thing, to have department heads who see themselves as a team, who have an active finance committee, and have budgets come before the board, presentations before the board, so the board can see not only the financial implications of what's being promoted or proposed, but also can see the programmatic issues, where a department head might say, I'm looking, town administrator told me cut back. Well, I can cut back. I can cut this program. Well, the board should have a chance to question that department head and say, but the community values that program. That's not a place where we're looking to cut back. Send the department head back to the drawing board to find a place that will have less impact on services to the resident.
I've got a follow-up, Chris. I'm interested in your conversation about the use of the Finance Committee and the engagement of the Finance Committee. And there's no wrong or right answer. I just want to hear what your thoughts are. Would you, from what I hear, would you engage the Finance Committee actively with building your budget and developing your budget right from day one?
That's a call for the Board of Selectmen to make, frankly. But what you have to do is keep the Finance Committee informed of what's happening. And I think that's important, to say, here's where we're here. You can't get the Finance Committee out in front of the Board of Selectmen unless that is the way you approach things. Some communities have the Finance Committee do the first whack. But most of the time, you have the Board of Selectmen have their budget come to the Finance Committee. But if you withhold the information from the Finance Committee to the last minute, you put yourself in a bad position, you put the FinCom in a bad position. If you keep them apprised of what's going on, and most of it is discussed in public at Board of Selectmen meetings, it's not telling the utmost inner workings all the time, it's just making sure, the DPW director came before the board last night, you reach out to the FinCom chairman. Here are the questions that came up, here's the response. I'm gonna, get them the first draft of the department's budgets early on, share with them the direction the board's going. I think involving not just the Finance Committee, but in general, involving your volunteer committees, making them feel a part of the decision-making. I mean, that's the best asset any community of this size has, right? You're a volunteer-based government. And so it's easy to get involved in your day-to-day, dealing with the people you deal with, without reaching out to them. And sometimes they feel isolated. Sometimes they think there's no point in me serving because I'm expected to rubber stamp what's come before me. So active involvement, just reaching out to the chairman, say, here's what's going on. Here's what the board is expressing. Here's what department heads are saying they're having issues with. We have a budget summit before the budget development process in Linfield. We bring all the department heads the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen in a room, and we go around and the departments share what they see as the challenges they're facing, major expenses that they expect, programmatic issues they're looking at. I think it's a healthy way to start that dialogue at the beginning of the budget process.
Do you include the schools in that discussion?
We
as
do,
well?
and the school committee is invited as well. School committee chairman attends, superintendent of schools, and the business manager.
And as you're developing the budget before that point, before you have your budget summit, how is the involvement of the schools? What's the interaction with the
Well,
schools?
the summit's actually the kickoff. We do that very early on in the process, and we've actually moved it up. It used to be late around Thanksgiving time. Now we've moved it back up to October. So before we're developing, we're talking about where we see revenues being, where we see certain costs being, and they're hard, you don't know where you're gonna get. In state aid, you don't know where the insurance is always gonna be, but you have somewhat of a projection. You have certain big things you know are coming up. You have priorities that the board has discussed when it drew up its goals. So you have a chance to talk about those things. The school department will come in and they can give you a general feeling about something as far as special education, where they see that going. Enrollment, the upcoming kindergarten class. That starts getting everyone thinking about, okay, here's the things that might jar it. So before you start talking about, here's what I'm proposing, you have an overview of what I see on the horizon. The Board of Selectmen can make a statement, the chairman, after discussing with the board, they generally say, one of our goals is to have a balanced level services budget. In other words, we won't hurt any services. And the second thing that we have sometimes is they'll say, one of our goals is to craft a budget that would not require a Proposition 2.5 override, to manage debt or to put money towards reserves or OPEB. And again, this would stem from the board's goals. So you start with the goals, and you talk to the departments, you give them somewhat a feeling of where we're going to be. It's going to be a tough year. It's going to be a year that you might be able to ask for an incremental increase if you're a programmatic change that the board and the finance committee and the, excuse me, the residents value. And so people know what they're aiming for, rather than coming up with a blind stab at it on the department level.
Just one follow-up real quick on, you had mentioned, department heads and so on and so forth, and around the budgets process. What's Linfield's status with regard to water and sewer? You MWRA, or you private, or?
Linfield has 2 water districts independent of town government. So it's an unusual situation. They're both chartered by the legislature. So we have one that's well-driven in the center portion of town. The portion closest to Route 1 is MWRA. The rates for the MWRA section are higher, but they don't get the water ban that comes in the summer for the well-fed area. We've had some issues with one of the water districts in terms of water quality, not health issues, but brown, because of one of the wells is now feeding up a larger portion of minerals, which are healthy for you, but people notice the coloration or perhaps the odor of the minerals in the water. And people call town hall and expect you to be able to address it, and you have to say that's a different government. But the key, as with anything, is we have a great relationship with our water districts. The superintendents are in town hall all the time, keeping us abreast of things, asking us to publicize when they're doing hydrant flushing, when they have street sweeping and any issues where your water might become discolored. So we work hand in hand, but they set their own tax rates. They have their own form of government.
So even the well-driven district is out of the hands of the town government?
It is.
But is it owned, are the wells owned by the town of Linfield?
No, they're
No,
owned by
okay.
the district.
Okay. By the district, meaning, what's the district?
It's the water district. It's a geographical half of Linfield that's
Oh, okay.
designated by the,
So it extends past the borders of Linfield into,
no, it's only Linfield.
oh, Linfield?
And both of them are completely in Linfield, but they are 2 separate districts.
Sewer the same way?
We have very limited sewer in Linfield, only along
Oh,
Route 1.
okay, thank you. That's it.
Do they, relative to the water, I'm interested in this, do they have like their own town meeting as well?
They do. Generally very sparsely attended.
Yes.
I will say.
Elected water
Commissioners elected at the district meeting.
Okay, all right.
The next question is, what is your experience with economic development? Describe for us the most important planning initiative that you participated in over the course of your career, and what was your role in the planning process? Can you describe the keys to that success, to any success?
Well, this will sound, I've described the Market Street project, which is our main project, and I was not a member of the town government at the time. I was the editor of the local newspaper. Since that time, because that was a very major change to Linfield. Since the time I've come on, there's been very little commercial development because it was basically giving birth to a very large project, and the town had to take time to absorb that. But in recent times, we've had one of the other golf courses, and now the only golf course in town that's not part of town government, come forward, and they were looking to maintain the golf course and put some housing there. So I sat with the town administrator, who was new to the town, and we talked about what they were proposing, and we felt strongly, again, working with the developer, that looking at age-restricted housing would be the best for us, because our schools are about at capacity, and if they built a by right subdivision there, it could have put a great burden on our schools. So the developer agreed to construct a over 55 development. It would keep the open space in the golf course area. We worked with them on mitigation, and that was a protracted negotiation to talk about what they could contribute towards project mitigation. One of the issues that we had was there would be a somewhat burdened intersection in a section of Linfield that's not heavily trafficked, not near a highway. So they agreed to do an upgrade of that intersection. But what happened was it came before town meeting, and the majority favored it, but not 2/3. So the project was rejected. So we have to go back to the drawing board on that. But and I'm probably not at liberty to discuss this, but I will say that I've contributed some ideas about other mitigation factors that could be considered going forward, should they come back with a similar proposal, or a proposal that would increase residential development there. And I'd be happy to discuss that with any of you on a one-on-one basis.
If I may ask, how many units was proposed the town meeting rejected?
156.
Was it apartment style, or was it condo, townhouse?
It was townhouse. Yep.
Could I, and again, not asking you to go into specifics, but, thinking of that example in perhaps more general terms, do you have any thoughts in terms of, possible lessons learned, or if we could do this over hindsight perspective that may have adjusted town meeting results?
There was the landowner, the developer, and the various town boards. There were certain issues that were not resolved before it came to town meeting, so I think one of the issues was they didn't have a solution for water yet. So they were asking the town residents to kind of take it on faith that they would negotiate a water deal with a nearby community. But most people, when they're in a town like this, they want to see a buttoned-down proposal. They want all the details hammered out. The mitigation, because there were a number of people involved in the family trust, the developer, town, those details weren't hammered out to the last, actually the night of the meeting. Again, people like to feel that it's all been thought out, it's all been vetted, we've had a chance to see it. And frankly, on little issues, town meetings about the debate, things that people don't care deeply about, they come to town meeting, they listen, oh, what's this about? They can be swayed by the debate. On the big issues, most people come knowing how they're going to vote. So sometimes for a proponent of a development, it's a turn out the vote issue rather than a, let's see how we can propose this to the community. I think this project, the community felt a little rushed on this, with the details being buttoned down at the last minute. And I think there's a chance, the community knows something can go there by right. So it's a matter of getting comfortable with what's being proposed.
While we're on the topic of economic development, I was wondering in your trips to Maynard if you've had a chance to kind of peruse the downtown and what your thoughts are of our downtown in terms of economic development and revitalization, and if you've had any role of that in the Linfield area.
Again, Linfield's downtown is very limited. I will say something that happened in Linfield that with some foresight probably would have been handled differently. Along Route 1, we had varied development. Restaurants, shops, some car dealerships. The car dealerships have encroached to the point they've bought a lot of the surrounding properties, and now they dominate Route 1 except for on one side we have an office park. And we have a small retail development next to the office park. At some point, I think in hindsight, the town should have looked at that and said, do we want to take car dealership out of the permitted use there? Because you can tax buildings a lot better than you can tax pavement. So whenever you lose a commercial building to a car lot, there's a net loss. That hasn't hit the town so hard because we've had the Market Street development, but had we not had that development, it would have been a bad issue. In Linfield, we have two very small shopping areas. Maynard's downtown is a lot more like where I live in Peabody. It was a downtown where Linfield, you didn't shop in Linfield ever, except in the old days when there was a general store there and a guy grinding meat in the back. We have a small drugstore, we have basically a couple convenience stores and a sub shop and a few things like a barber shop, that type of thing. Maynard has a real downtown. And every downtown in the United States is challenged because of the changing manner of shopping. First it was the malls, then if the malls weren't bad enough for the downtown, then you had Amazon and online shopping. So you really have to work with the business community to get a good mix. Because there are, they want to rent their properties, but if you can help them recruit business by promoting the town, by saying, you have some really interesting, and I did drive around, it's somewhat diffuse, it's not just one, in Peabody and a lot of places, it's one street. You have kind of a area that's kind of in a star shape almost, where you have things, and I think you have to work with the merchants to upkeep on the appearance. I would say that one of the things you might look at is some kind of grant opportunity to help.
We have those types of things.
Okay. But aggressively working to make sure you have a good mix, talking as the town is a partner with the owners, seeing what can work, how you can help them, that type of thing. It's a difficult thing because downtowns are hard hit. Parking can be difficult. You can work with people to assist with the parking. You can try to, you're as business friendly as possible while protecting the residents. But they have to see you as a partner.
Do you have any thoughts on how you would, in a downtown like ours, which is, I think you described it okay, other than it needs an upkeep? We realize that. That's good. But no, my point is,
if someone's trying to improve their facade, you want to,
absolutely
I'm not making
true.
a criticism. I think every
and
downtown
I
has
understand, and we address that too.
anything we can do to help.
How would you address attracting smaller businesses to those types of storefronts like you see
Right.
here in Maynard versus, Market Street? They have virtually the bigger stores, but
I think the biggest thing you can do is work to bring people together about issues like parking. and providing employee parking, work with the surrounding community, see if you can locate some employee parking so that in a lot of downtowns, the employees tie up significant parking near the storefronts, makes it difficult. I saw when I've driven here a couple of times, I've seen, it seems pretty busy. I mean, the parking spaces are full up. So it seems like you're operating to some degree to capacity in that manner. You've got a lot of interesting businesses. I think sometimes communities get plagued by several of the same type of business. So I think you've got a very promotable downtown. And to some degree, you work and you make it a walkable area where people, who live here. If you're looking at mixed-use development, downtown making it attractive. So if you have a residential developer working with you in downtown, where you help promote this as a place you can, for elderly residents, let's say, who just want to be able to walk to a place to grab something to eat, to get their hair cut, to do some small shopping. I mean, I think that's the type of thing you can do. There's no big solution, I think. There's no magic bullet for it. I think it's all just working on a incremental basis to make things easier for business and make it more attractive.
Thanks.
Okay. Can you describe for us both your managerial style and your organizational strategy? And considering your response to these questions, what town government issues would you delegate and to whom?
My managerial style is collaborative. I think and communicative. I think the most important thing you can do is keep lines of communication open. You don't wait for a department head to call you. Sometimes you see the people in the building all the time, the department heads, you know pretty much what they're doing. There's some off-site people. You have to make sure you reach out to the library director, to the person at the Council on Aging. I think one of the major things you can do to make sure that everyone's pulling in the same direction is to foster a collegial atmosphere with the school department. I've seen in various communities where there's poor communication, there's some rivalry sometimes. I'm the son of a professional educator. My father was a teacher, principal, school superintendent. So as a newspaper person, I found myself sometimes being the go-between between the selectmen and the school committee, because I was the only person in town at both meetings. And someone will say, "Did you hear what the school committee did last night? They did that." And I said, "Well, I was there, and that's not really how it happened." But you don't want to have to rely on your reporter to be the liaison. I was able to work out some things just by being the person who can say, "No, I think if you heard why they did that, you would." So you have to reach out. You want a really good relationship with the superintendent of schools, where if they have a problem, they pick up the phone to let you know, "Hey, here's what we're facing," especially with issues like school safety being so prominent, involving not only the schools, but the police department has to be involved. DPW and schools have to work hand in hand. Every aspect of town government. So that's the first thing. You pull the school department so they feel as part of a whole, not two separate and distinct entities. And that's done because you have no power over them directly as a town, by collaborating. The other thing is you walk around, you recognize when people are there late. You go around and you thank them when they've gone through something difficult. That is the easiest way. And I think the problem with municipal government, any government, is if you do a really good job, at the end of the day, you get your 2%. If you do a job where we're not going to get rid of you, you're kind of getting along, but there's nothing glaring, you get your 2%. So while I think you have to address that as well, and that's something I would enjoy talking about, the easiest way to build morale is to appreciate people. It costs the town nothing. You just be mindful. You walk around. When I was interim town administrator, I think department heads would say they heard "thank you" more often than they had heard in many years, just because it's what you do. If someone's there late with the light on and you're getting ready to leave, you walk down. You say, "Thanks for staying. What do you got going? Is there something I can help you with?" That's the type of thing. Also, again, I think communication. Department heads don't want to be surprised. We had a situation where a department head was kind of caught on his heels when he found out the board felt very strongly about him accomplishing something, where he was working on a number of things and wasn't focused on that. And it went downhill very quickly. And it was at heart because this person was a competent person, doing a good job in many areas. It was a communication issue. The board should have more strongly communicated to the town administrator. The town administrator should have more strongly communicated to the department head the expectations. But what happened was, with poor communication, the thing ran off the rails. And honestly, it didn't have to be that way. So I think keeping those line of communications open is the most important thing. I would have to say on what tasks I delegate, I think in a small town, you have to look at the personnel. And I don't think I could tell you that right now without seeing the strengths of your various department heads. Some department heads are excellent at procurement. Others, you have to hold their hand. Some people are fantastic about working the website and can be the help to you. Hey, I need to get something out. Can you get on the website, on the they can do that. You have to see their strengths and see where you can delegate. I don't think there's a blueprint I could come in with without having evaluated the strengths and areas that need improvement of your various personnel.
Okay.
Would you think that part of the town administrator's role would be to regularly attend school committee meetings?
I don't think I would do that unless directed by the board to do so. I think there might be a feeling if I did it on my own that I was trying to assert power, and I certainly wouldn't want to do it right out of the gate if that wasn't the practice.
Well, I'll follow up with that then. How would you ensure coherent communication? Because we don't have an in-town reporter that sits at both the school
Right,
committee.
right.
It's a paper that services a couple different towns. There's no real allegiance to whether it's Maynard or not, right? No disrespect to the paper. That's not their role.
I
How do
understand.
you ensure that you get competent and coherent, consistent communication about what transpired at both the BOS meetings?
You
and
have
the
to
school committee meetings?
foster that on a peer-to-peer basis with the superintendent.
Okay.
They report to a board just like you're in the same position they are. They report to a board, they have to be very cognizant of what the public's thinking. You want them to view you as a person who can help them. If, hey, I've got a bind here, it's someone they can bounce an idea off, especially if it's something that extends out beyond the schools to things that involve town departments. I think you have to develop a collegial relationship that, hey, we both want to make each other look good. We want both boards to work in harmony. We want to have a feeling that, we're not being blindsided if there's an issue coming up. If you got something that might be a run-up to an issue budget-wise, hey, we might fall short, so that there's that. And so, yeah, you talk to the superintendent a lot.
Thank you.
Not necessarily directly related, but with your experience in Linfield, how has been the relationship between town government and the school committee?
Very good, I would say. Very good. There are moments in history where they weren't so good. Sometimes it was a personality matter between the superintendent and the school committee. I find when there are people involved on the town side who have either grandchildren in the schools or children themselves in the schools or have neighbors who have school-age children, it's easier. Sometimes there's a feeling in a community like Linfield, suburban community, that the schools get the bulk of the money, the bulk of the attention. So it's the nature of it, right? It's the largest department. And you have to make your department heads understand, in a community of our size, you're as good as your school district. If you have a poorly performing school district, nothing else, that's the first thing you have to fix. You can't have a poorly performing school district and have a successful community of this size. So you all work together. And you have to work, I'm reading a book about Eisenhower and the preparation for D-Day, and
You're a couple days late.
I'm working on it. Okay. But that's right. And, it put me in mind of town government. I mean, he had the various allies, and they all have their fiefdoms, and they all have their pride, their priorities. They all think this should happen. And you have to, Eisenhower as a leader is a model of bringing all these people together, setting aside his own ego, making them work for the better by basically communicating between them. Hey, I'd like to do it, but you understand, I've got to work with this person too. And we all have to look at it as a team. We have to work as a team. And that happened. So it can happen on the world stage. It can certainly happen in a community of 12,000 people.
Okay. Number 8, I don't think you need to answer. I think,
Yeah.
I'll read the question, but I think you've answered it in the conversation based on most of your other questions. But the answer to the question was, or is, does your work history contain any experience with town meeting, which obviously it does, and if so, please explain. I think we've had several examples of, town meeting things. So unless somebody has a follow-up on 8 specifically, we'll just kind of pass that because we've got that.
No. I had noted that, actually. He did a thorough
Yeah.
explanation of town meeting
Okay.
process earlier.
Could I just add this one thing? In today's day and age, information is crucial. I'm the person who puts together all the handouts, all the informational. We get it up on the website early. We're not handing it to you as you walk in the door at town meeting. We put out news alerts. We put it on Facebook. Here are all the documents related to town meeting. You get it out there so people can feel they come prepared. You give them ample time to ask their questions before town meeting.
Okay.
Do you have a quorum here?
Yeah, it's 100.
I like they met in the room.
75.
This looks like some of our town meetings. But
There was a
sometimes
push
we
to
have more
no
people on
quorum.
the stage behind us and next to us. But that's how it goes. The next question was, do you have any prior experience negotiating collective bargaining agreements? And if so, how do you perceive the relationship between labor and management? And how does that perception help to attain the best agreement for all parties?
Again, it's a teamwork thing. People take pride in the work or have to take pride in the work. If you have people who aren't taking pride in the work in a small town like this, you've got a problem. You have to work your department heads to make sure that either they come on board or they move aside. Most people want to feel that they're doing a good job for the residents. They're out there in the community. So, again, expectations is the most important. Communication through the department heads. If they've got a problem with someone, call them in. Don't let it fester. In terms of collective bargaining, first rule is that I've learned over time from a town administrator who's one of my mentors is you have to let people save face. Even sometimes they'll come in asking for the moon, and you never tell them that that's ridiculous. You just explain patiently why I understand why you would want that. Here's why I can't make that happen. But the thing is, before you get down to the bargaining table, they have to feel that you have their best interests in heart, that you're not trying to get one by on them, that you're not trying to take advantage, that you respect the work they do, that you know them. Because in a small town, you should know the people in the bargaining unit, not immediately as you come in, but you should know them. You should have already told them, hey, great job on the cemetery cleanup for Memorial Day. Great job in getting that road work done with minimal interruption. Things like that. So when you sit down at the bargaining table, you already know what's happening. The other thing is, you have to set a ground rule that we can't agree to anything that is going to impinge on delivery of service to the residents. It's a disservice to the town government, to the residents. It's a disservice to you and your department. We can talk about everything else. And you have to work hand in hand. We had an issue in Linfield where, during a downturn where we had loss of state aid, we were looking at layoffs. So we came up with a change to the health insurance. And some people had to pay more. We had to change programs. It couldn't have happened if they didn't trust town administration, that you're not out to take advantage, that you care about us, you want this to happen. There was trust. Okay, if you tell me I'm not going to be affected, if you tell me I might have to pay a little more, but the services I get if one of my kids, my spouse gets sick, they're going to be there. You do that preparation, then the trust is there. Bargaining, once the trust is established, is pretty easy. And keeping them to understand what your financial restrictions are, that's what you're talking about now.
Have you personally sat at the table
I have.
and been the chief negotiator or?
I've not been the chief negotiator because there was always the town administrator.
Okay.
But I have sat at the table, grievance hearings, and with a contract.
Would you anticipate as town administrator that you would be the chief negotiator along with perhaps council, but you as the the chief executive per
Yes,
se.
yes,
would
and
be-
then, and.
That would not be one of the ones, one of the things you would delegate, is that true?
That's right. If that is, and again, I would be very open to your past way of doing things. I don't believe in coming in and saying, all your traditions are going out the window because I'm the new guy. But I'd be mindful of the way you've done things in the past, and very receptive to it. But I think you have to take responsibility for that, because you will fail to succeed in large part. And the other thing I would like to say is, you can't do anything, you can't make any concession without having the department head as a crucial element of your planning. You never, and I've seen it happen because of poor communication, where we had to button this up, we had to give them something, I gave them this, and the department head turns to you after the fact and says, what did you do that for? That undoes all my years of work. The other thing I would say is, there are little things in every contract where there's a gray area. These is where your grievances come from. During the whole year, if you have a 3-year contract, a 2-year contract, you have to be keeping a file on the little things that you have to change in the contract to make sure we're getting what we want. A little example, we had a thing where you had to do a building check every day. Well, some enterprising person decided, I'll do it at 11:55 p.m. and at 12:05 a.m. And they were within the language of the contract. Well, you have to call them in and make a change right away. But there are smaller, less egregious things that you have to iron out, and that's not the year we do bargaining. That's an every day, every week, every month process.
Okay. Do you have in your career, do you have experience in obtaining grants from municipalities, either through the state, federal, or other sources? How much grant experience do you have?
We've worked on grants. Unfortunately, or fortunately, for a community like Linfield, it's very difficult to get grants that are competitive grants. We get the entitlement grants, but we haven't had great success on a townwide level in obtaining grants. We've applied for certain grants, but our lack of propinquity to, let's say, mass transit really harms us. We had a parks grant that we worked on very hard. We weren't able to get it. Our fire departments had some luck getting things when they had the 9/11 funding came through. We were able to get some things for our public safety, including a major piece of equipment for our fire department. But Linfield has not had great success in getting competitive grants. Generally, they say there's nothing wrong with your application, but you don't have low-income housing, you're not close to any major transit. It's difficult.
Okay. The next question is, improve communication with the Board of Selectmen, multiple department heads, and the citizens of Maynard in general have been a priority to the Board of Selectmen at our annual goal-setting meetings for the past few years. If you were to see communication as a shortcoming, how would you improve the same?
Well, I think I've talked about some of the things, putting things on the website, letting people track your progress on the major issues. There's about 20 things we track, things like small things that are very much of a concern to the neighborhood about. We had a gas station that got closed down. It went into tax title. There was big issues with the cleanup of the property. It sat there as an eyesore as we went through the legal process. The people in the neighborhood would have become very frustrated if we weren't communicating with them constantly, telling them where we are. That's the type of thing you do. And again, it's just an effort, it's a mindset in terms of with your department head and your board. You can't be jealous. I don't think it's a recipe for disaster to decide I'm going to try to keep this from the public or the board, unless it's something legally you have to, personnel matters, legal matters. The best thing to do is make sure people understand where you're going. And the board especially, make sure the board knows what's happening. They might have ideas. They can't, you can't have Sarah, you have to keep with the open meeting law, but it doesn't mean you can't give them an update. You can't inform them, here's what's going on. Someone might say, I'd like to see that on the next agenda as a response. That's a completely appropriate response. Let's see if we can take that up on the next agenda. The chairman sets the agenda. And with the public, it's a different world. It used to be the newspaper was your vehicle, right? I was there before cable TV came in to the meetings. So people would say things in an open meeting, say, oh, never mind that. And for a while, they kept saying it even with the camera there, and the press would just point to the camera and say, but now you have an expectation in the community that you're going to have a website that's not just going to put up the annual town report and the financial documents, but that you'll be talking to them constantly about road closures, traffic accident on the highway that's tying things up and rerouting people. You let them know. Road work, it's coming. There's going to be, again, hydrant flushing, little things. So communication is key. Facebook, Twitter, those are problematic because you can't be chasing every squirrel up a tree in terms of the rumor mill or what's going on, because you get into a back and forth. I can tell you, Facebook does not allow you to have no comments, but Linfield's page has no comments. I figured out how to do it. There's a workaround, because you can't have someone putting something incendiary on the town's website. We say right up the top, this is a place for the town to disseminate information. If you have a concern, call, email. We will get right back to you. And when we come up with, but you can't get into a back and forth. It's against our policy, for one thing. A lot of bad things can happen. And it's your page. If someone in the middle of the night puts up something that, heaven forbid, is something that would cause the town shame in terms of the person's added to what they say, you can't have a town administrator or another person staying up 24/7 monitoring the Facebook page. But there are ways to do it where you get the information out, you invite people to call. You let them know we want your input.
Okay. Any follow-up? All right, the last one is really two questions in one again. First of all, please tell us one thing about yourself we would not know by reading your resume or taking part in this interview. Kind of a Google-type fact, if you would. And then, if you'd like to make a closing statement to us or ask us any questions, please feel free to do so at this time.
Okay. This is like Jeopardy when they
Yeah,
ask you
No
to tell.
yeah. We're more polite than Alex.
I have a lot of offbeat interests. I was a history major. I'm a Civil War enthusiast. When I travel oftentimes, try to convince my wife that it'd be great to go here, and by the way, I can visit a Civil War battlefield over there. I'm a horribly failed jazz saxophone player and piano player. You'll take my word for it, because they don't let me to perform in public anymore, by popular request. But I find I've got, again, I'm a voracious reader, and I find a lot of times, because I read history, that much of what I read has application to local government. That people on a grand scale are facing the same issues that you're facing on a local scale. And the question I have for you is, what role do you see the town administrator playing in terms of executing your vision for the town? What is your ideal outlook on how a town administration interact with the board?
With the board,
Right.
if I may.
Go right ahead.
So,
Speak first.
Everyone can have.
in my opinion, a lot of the things you outlined earlier were something that I think would have been very, very comforting to have as a board member the last 3 years. Direct communication, consistent cadence, expectation of accountability. Those are all things that are tantamount to anybody's boss. In a community where you need, a community is really based on partnership, right? If you don't have the trust and the access to communication coming from the leadership of the municipality staff, that's sometimes problematic. Your example, I was smirking a couple times as you were talking about the soccer field and here and there, and each one of us have been in a position where we found out information separately or maybe at the same time about things that were ongoing that, quite frankly, all five of us thought we should have known ahead of time. I can count a number of situations where I've had to go to town administrative staff in the past and ask for information that to me would be a given that should be given to their, the elected board. So accountability, transparency, information sharing is what I would expect back from, a relationship from town administrator to the Board of Selectmen. But most importantly, leadership from a town administrator to the people that report up through them, and not a delegation willy-nilly of duties because they're so focused on one area. The job is very, very difficult. There's no doubt when you're the captain of a ship, you're in charge, but you have a duty to do things, and you can't give responsibility for key items in the town because you think it's okay to do without checking with the Board of Selectmen. So that's just my dialogue on that.
Thank you.
Well, one of the other issues, and you touched on it a little bit, is that, the role of the town administrator is to carry out the policies and the procedures and the things that, are established in this room. Typically, that's how it works, but on occasion, it works where we're given a policy that apparently has already been agreed to or something like that. So our vision of what comes next and the next set of people to walk through these doors is that it's gonna go backwards to what it's supposed to be. Because, like a lot of towns, we've gotten away from the relationship the FinCom had always had in Maynard with the town administrator in the budget process. We've gotten away from, with the town administrator office and the town administrator assistant office, the rules, how the rules play out, how they're instituted, how they're followed, how they're used, and how government operates. The role of the selectmen in the day-to-day is not meddling, is not micromanaging, but to Terrence's point, it is to know when certain things happen. Why are we the last 5 people in town to know that we lost a well in our well field? Why are we the last 5 people to know that on a day that a snow day that school's going to be canceled because we have 3 pieces of equipment that broke the day before, the night before, in pursuit of removing the snow. So those type of things are the type of things that I see as needing to be different as we move forward, because it's we're elected, and people put a lot of trust in what we do, so it's our responsibility to use that position to make things right and make things better. I guess the goal for most everybody here, and we have before we have elections, we always have a candidates night, and pretty much across the board, everybody's desire is to leave this room in better position than when you walked into this room. And we need to get back to that, and that's changed over 15 to 20 years through various town administrators, not just the people that were here most recently and are here, but a series of town administrators who, through their own needs and desires, have taken things from the plate of other people in town onto their own, and it's kind of not made for a good situation in some cases.
My only additional comment, I totally agree with the transparency and the communication with the board and whatever, but there's also a role that the town administrator, in my vision, has, and that's representing the community. And that is, in many ways, the presentation at town meeting becomes hugely important in my eyes because it's reflective of the 5 of us. If town meeting is like completely, just not prepared, that's a reflection on the community as a whole, and most importantly, a reflection on the Board of Selectmen. Also, the way that the person who sits in the town administrator's office communicates with residents when they call in, when they stop in, when they are interacting on the street. That's the role of a town administrator too. And it's very important from my perspective because it's reflective of our community. And, I want our community to look good and to be good because we are good, and not to be something that is viewed by residents as being controversial or, in any way negative towards the individual. The residents, we all pay for our town administrator to be our, leader, and, town administrator works for us. So.
I would offer a perspective from a process angle, and kind of building on the themes of communication, but I would say layering the theme of communication against the process that underlies that. And so part of what I see is beyond that element of taking the broad guidance and priorities of the board, there's a vast array of intricacies of tasks and projects and activities that are crossing the desk and the responsibility of the town administrator. And then against that, you have the regular bi-weekly meetings with the board. You certainly have more regular interactions with the chairman of the board. But there's that piece of, I think, in those meetings that are happening, helping to, from a, whether it's tracking with documents, whether it's using board docs, but helping to maintain and tactfully remind, in some cases, the way in which issues have progressed, right? Because, you know, I think I could take any one of a half dozen examples of where, as the Board of Selectmen, we might be asked to take up an issue in November. It's not necessarily formally appearing before us as a board for a second time until January. How do, you know, in some ways, how does the town administrator help enable the board to see the continuity between those discussions so that there is that feeling of continuing to see progress against stuff? So I liked the idea of kind of, you know, not only conceptually, how is the town progressing against the annual goals and strategies that have been set, but how then do you further break that down under specific initiatives? Because I think that's kind of an ongoing challenge.
And I would echo what everyone's already said. I mean, to me, in the year that I've been on the board, I feel there's a lack of partnership, and I think that's really, really important. A lot of times I feel like things are disjointed and we're on parallel tracks and we have similar goals, and that lack of communication and transparency really inhibits us to accomplish those goals effectively. So I'd like to see more of that and see someone that we can grow with as a board and as a town for the greater good of our community and the people we all serve.
Thank you. I will say, people ask me sometimes, and I say, so you have 9 years of experience in municipal government, but I have 25 years of badgering people in municipal government on behalf of the residents. And so that has been really, I think, given me a great perspective on understanding what people expect, what frustrates the residents, and how best to communicate sometimes dry things like budgetary issues to residents so they understand why it impacts them. I think working for the newspaper for a long time in one community gave me a great understanding of how it all works together, from the residents to the various boards to the employees of the town.
Anybody else, any questions or comments? I think we're good. For that, I want to thank you for making the trip here tonight and answering our questions, and also for, you know, just interviewing for the process and taking part in the process and applying for the position. We did a lot of good information this evening, and we'll be in touch soon.
Great, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Very good job. Thank you. Welcome.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, we take a 5-minute recess.
Next guy's at 8:30.
Maybe I'll run into you up at Market Square.
Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, just a quick, this is gonna be, just so you know, this will be on our local cable channel, and then they'll copy it as well, and it'll run on the second local cable channel. We have two. And, we're asking everybody the same 10 questions.
Okay.
If you have at any point you have any questions for us, just feel free to, ask us, and we'll answer what we can.
Okay.
So to start, if you could just, it's just, you know, take a minute, introduce yourself to us, and then kind of give us a little insight as to why you made the decision to apply for the town administrator's position in Maynard, and why you believe you might be the best candidate for the position.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me, and especially a lot of gratitude go towards the search committee and their work and vetting process and whatnot. I know that was a lot to undertake on behalf of the town and for the selectmen and whatnot. I really appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me. This is an exciting opportunity. I tried to time it. I'm about 10 minutes away drive with a couple of lights in Acton. I live in West Acton Village, and I spend a good amount of time in Maynard, which is fortunately probably a significant factor why I'm excited for the opportunity to be the town administrator in Maynard, because of how much I've adored and really been fascinated by Maynard and whatnot. Maynard has a lot of opportunities, I think, that a lot of the surrounding towns may not have, or at least can't quite grasp the way Maynard can. Because of your proximity and your tight and your passion and whatnot, I think that's something that I would like to be a part of and help to facilitate and grow. But you also have a lot of challenges, and I think that's the sort of position that I would like to be in to help you usher through those challenges and then come out successful.
Okay.
Is that maybe not enough about myself? I
No,
could go into a
that's
little
fine, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Can I just go deeper on one thing? So I noticed you were an officer in the Marine Corps, so if you wouldn't just give me 2 minutes on your background in the Marines.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everyone would probably like to hear that. So.
Sure. Although that is only one job I've had since college. But right, I was an officer in the Marine Corps following college. And the Marine Corps was a great opportunity for me. I got to see the world. They paid for school twice. But through there, I had obviously a lot of leadership experiences and whatnot of organizations and units of differing sizes and different situations and different missions. Every 2 years or so, I would get a new mission and find myself in a new unit, which meant getting to know all new people, building new relationships, new partnerships. My bosses and the chain of command would change, as well as the people that worked for me. The Marine Corps taught me a couple of key tenets, which is flexibility, but as much planning as you possibly can. So with that, I've been able to transfer those skills and those experiences in my civilian career. So at the state level and at the municipal level, I've been able to see where you do as best planning as you possibly can. Try to foresee some of the circumstances and build those relationships to be successful, but obviously with a certain acceptance that there's going to be unforeseen circumstances, and that flexibility is key. Yeah, the Marine Corps, I'm very grateful for the opportunities it provided me and the lessons that I've learned from it. I had a good time. I was very fortunate. I came unscathed, so to speak. But I had a number of deployments, and I try to learn with those lessons. I try to learn from those lessons every day.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
well, thank you.
And as a former Navy man, I thank you for being part of our organization.
Oh, very well.
Here we go.
Noted.
It's dying to have someone from the Marines show up.
I had a good ride for 7 months on a Navy ship. That was fun.
Could you talk a little bit about your thinking and decision of kind of making the transition from the governor's level, moving down into into municipal level?
That's a good question. To do a little bit of a transition from the Marine Corps, during my time in the Marine Corps, specifically on my deployment to Iraq, I worked hand in hand with the Iraqi people, and that showed me the importance of localized government. Yes, we were being funded at the federal level, Department of Defense and State Department, but we were trying to do local projects using local people. Well, that really inspired me for what I was going to do after the Marine Corps. So I went to grad school, and I started to work for the state after that, with a little bit of time working for the mayor's office in Boston. But the state allowed me to see the interaction and had the influences that the state could have onto the local activities and initiatives that they had. Specifically, I was involved in the Patrick administration with the Community Innovation Challenge Grant, which was an initiative that administration had to sort of inspire new ideas, specifically regionalization, but also at the localized level, on the street level as well. I took away from that a lot about how the state can, for good or for worse, make policies that can really help or hurt some of the municipalities. Not intentionally hurt, of course, but through unfunded mandates and increased taxes and whatnot, that can have detrimental effects. But my passion was to be at the street level. I wanted to be able to At the state level, I was working on budgets that affected Holyoke. Well, I've only been to Holyoke once, and I think I was just driving through. So it wasn't the same to me to work on these policies, to write these memos and budgets, and then to not see how they came to fruition down the line. But local level has its own sort of interesting minutia. All politics is local. So where I can try to do the most good I can, it's really about how people feel down the street from you. So sometimes the bigger picture can get lost when you're dealing with the day-to-day. But I love it. I think the municipal level is where I saw myself as I was transitioning out of the Marine Corps, and so far it's lived up to what I expected.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Follow-up? All right. So the first actual question is, there is a natural tension between owning the day-to-day operations of the town as the town administrator and deferring to the priorities, guidance, and direction of the Board of Selectmen. Please tell us how you would approach this and provide any examples you can of how you've navigated a similar dynamic in the past.
Sure. So you are the elected officials. You are the executive board of the town, and I'm the executor, so to speak. The town administrator is the person that follows through, tries to be successful upon the goals and the policies that the Board of Selectmen provide. Communication would be key in order to be successful in that. Whether they be day to day, and it would have to depend on what you are most comfortable or what your preferences are as a board. So maybe you're best with text messages, or maybe you'd prefer an email from time to time, or direct phone call is the only way to get a hold of you. So be it. If that's the best way to give you the information you need to make those informed decisions, then that's the way it should be done. There may be some times where there's conflicting opinions, even amongst the boards, but as well as with the administration. And that's good. No one should there shouldn't be groupthink, so to speak. There should be differing opinions as to the best way to get things done. I see my role would be to provide you the counsel or the past practices or the information just to allow you to be confident in those decisions that you're making, whether I'm 100% in agreement with you or not. Right, I think that's what you would need from the town administrator, to be honest, forthright, and informative to make those decisions soundly. Right.
Do you have any, from in your current position, and you don't have to be specific, but, examples that you can think of kind of how you have seen that sort of a dynamic play out within the town?
Specifically with the Board of Selectmen and then the administration, or?
Yeah. Or how it's trickled down to
Sure.
sort of across departments, or?
Oh, sure. So the Board of Selectmen have a difficult job because they're trying to plan for the future as well as address the ongoing needs of the town and whatnot. I have found what is important is to have the sort of the goals in mind. I know that's a certain formal term, but to have the aspiration or the how you might think the Board of Selectmen might approach a problem. If you have the understanding ahead of time, when these sort of dilemmas come up, whether it be from the departments or from the community, you might be able to anticipate the sort of reaction or at least the information the selectmen may need. I've noticed that in Westford or in the city or the state level as well. If the closer the relationship is amongst the administration and the executive, the Board of Selectmen, then I might be able to know what information you need to know, or at least be able to respond in a way that's it corresponds with how you might want the situation to go. It probably won't be perfect, and when in doubt, always try to keep the board informed. Right, but specifically, is there tension amongst any board and administration? There may be, but communication would be key to make sure everyone's on the same page, at least about the path, the general direction of where the town should take things.
So actually, the next question, any other follow-ups, or?
No?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So Maynard as a community has an admittedly high tax base, and our size limits our new growth potential. These factors, as well as the constant reduction in state funding, contribute to an annual struggle to retain full services while balancing our budget. What financial strategies would you employ to retain high service levels while maintaining a balanced budget?
No, that's a good question, and it's tough for most municipalities. I mean, I can't imagine a single town or city that would say they're perfectly happy with where they're sitting fiscally. I'm sure Westford is fortunate that we have a relatively low tax rate because we have a significant commercial tax revenue that we have, and it's a bigger town, so the burden is spread wider and whatnot. Maynard is not so big, and Maynard has a lot of conservation space, open space, which is good. Maynard also has a lot of opportunity for growth. And in regards to addressing so the sort of like fiscal challenges and whatnot, how we address that, there's a couple of lessons I learned specifically from the state level where I was on the governor's budget team under the Patrick administration. So that was a key difference in that not only was my job different, but the Baker administration had a different direction. They had different policies when it came to budgeting. One sort of lesson that I've taken away from that is called performance-based budgeting. So you're trying to tie results to the money that you're spending. That doesn't work everywhere. Not every organization can apply that strictly. But it's important to ask some tough questions when it comes to budgeting. Why are we spending this? Or why does this department, need this more program? Or what are the initiatives from the Board of Selectmen or the community, and what might be some results of that? Or how can we work collaboratively to achieve those same goals? A lot of questions asking, not so much accepting the past or the sort of like, we did very little the same budget year to year. We would always ask the questions and have people provide justification as to what they were trying to get done. And it's not to say they were bad justifications, but we just need to hear it just to be sound. But also to recognize that there is a need for growth, smart growth, so to speak, to make sure that it's community driven, that there's a buy-in amongst the boards and all the committees and whatnot, that as we welcome these developers, or as we try to, whether it be 129 Parker Street or Mill and Main, and there's some new housing developments that may come, that's great. But we can't put all our chickens into that basket, so we have to make sure that we recognize the potential results, but then work with the current resources that we have. And performance-based budgeting might be one of those techniques to use.
Thank you. The next question is, recently the Board of Selectmen unveiled a strategy for a more disciplined approach to budgeting and financial planning.
Oh, there you go.
That would help us set aside money for capital projects, and which will require a high degree of discipline and restraint in the face of budgetary needs and asks. Do you have thoughts on this proposed strategy, some of the challenges the town might face in maintaining the approach, and how you might navigate the process? In the latter, you can include, any thoughts you might have on who you might invite into the process, such as the schools or other departments.
Okay, that's a good question, and it's tough. I'll try to address it as the question was asked. So whenever you're trying to implement a new policy or new program or approach specifically to budgeting, there will be some tension. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions asked about, what kind of products you'd like to see, how your budgeting should be reported, what do we show immediately to the public, and then what is the best way to get the information to you to make those decisions, or the finance committee, or the school committee and whatnot. Which leads into the next part, which is I think buy-in should be taken at the beginning. From day one, you should try to get as much collaboration, or at least understanding amongst the different stakeholders in the budget. And the schools play a huge role in that. A massive role in that. And if you don't have that sort of, at least trust, you may not be on the same page, but at least you trust each other's information and the input and the opinions of the other side, then you'll have a more sound, a more confident budget that you can put forward for town meetings approval and whatnot. And having the community input as well. Yes, we make all the meetings public and whatnot, but we need to make sure that all the information is accessible. I love the idea of the ClearGov program that Maynard is implementing. I've seen that done in different formats in other towns, and sometimes it's very successful in that people really know about it. But if they don't know about it exists, or if they don't look at it, or if the information is a little too complicated to digest, then we kind of have to reevaluate how we're presenting it. But that is also a key aspect of the budget and how it passes. Make sure you have the buy-in from the community as well as all the committees and the boards. And that way, when you go to town meeting, everyone is pretty sure of the path forward.
I noticed in that your 100-day plan, which I think is fantastic, that you sent, you mentioned really meeting with school department and committees.
Right.
Is that a process you envision seeing going past that 100 days and
Oh,
being
absolutely.
involved and kind of having ongoing budget discussions? Is this kind of like during budget season only, or would this extend throughout the year and be?
Oh, no, it's certainly throughout the year. I think it would take some conversations with those players, school committee, finance committee, capital sort of like planning projects and whatnot, just to see where we stand on things. But yeah, that has to be ongoing. Obviously, it's heightened, or at least the frequency becomes, increases as you get closer to the budget season, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So right, especially within those first 100 days, I would need to make those relationships. But after that, because I'm at slightly a disadvantage when it comes to some of the, like, I haven't been in town long enough to be able to know that, I think November is generally when the beginning of the budget sort of process begins. I might have to start that, at least myself, a little sooner than that, or at least have a little more conversations, either one-on-one with board and committee members, just to make sure that I'm on the same page about what their priorities are or their sort of concerns are moving forward. Right, I would definitely establish a good relationship with all the different players, all the different inputs for the budget continuously. I would want to be able to have any sort of dilemma or concern or question. I wanted to come to my office. I would like to be able to pick up the phone and us be able to talk about it and not hesitate to try to be on the same page. Oh, and I really liked the initiative of the school committee. I'm trying to remember what it was. With the school committee and the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee to sit down together. This year in particular, I understand was well, I'm sure every year is fiscally challenging,
Mm-hmm.
but there were some sort of public sort of like issues that were brought up. But I felt like they were sincere in their compliments that having that sort of, I can't remember what the name of the group was. Maybe it didn't have a
It's a
formal name.
subcommittee.
Subcommittee, maybe?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great idea. Maybe it should have been done a long time ago, but I think that's something that to look for or to look at going forward as a great example of that collaboration. People feel more comfortable if they know that it's being heard.
Okay. What is your experience with economic development? Could you describe for us the most important planning initiatives that you've participated in over the course of your career, and what was your role in the planning process, and what were the keys to any successes?
Sure. Economic development has been one of my passions since I was probably in the Marine Corps. And I know that sounds a little odd. Why would the Marines do a great job spending money, maybe not so much of making money? However, when I was deployed to Iraq, one of my jobs was to assess and to support the infrastructure. They had a problem with drinking. A lot of the children were drinking out of the same aqueducts that Alexander the Great had created as he went on his campaigns. Well, that could use some improvement, and the children were getting sick, and that kind of led to, I don't know, when the family has to be more concerned about their own safety and their own health and well-being, they're not thinking about making money or progressing the town. What we did is we used U.S. funding, but we used Iraqi engineers and Iraqi contractors and whatnot to build water treatment plants. And we only had to make a couple for this village, and then people could feel safe about the water they were drinking, which meant that they could move on to other things. How to increase their date. It was along the Euphrates, it was all palm trees and dates. How to increase that fold, or how to increase their marketability. So that kind of led me to think, well, how do I see the sort of influence of government in the United States? And that when I went to grad school, that was one of my sort of thesis. Well, I did write my thesis on the sort of economic improvement potential of this certain neighborhood in Philadelphia, which was struggling economically as well and being influenced by a lot of gentrification and whatnot. So I focus on a couple of key factors, which is how can federal fund money or federal policies or the state level, how can it influence the street level? Like how can it make sure that people feel safe and get jobs and can be successful in their family? There's a number of ways to do it. It kind of depends on the situations of each locality and street and whatnot. Some people need jobs, some people need to get to work. So I think I could take those lessons of government's ability to influence the local economy through grants, the community. I study a lot of the block grant system and whatnot, and the history of that and how it can be used at the state and local level. And then that kind of led me into my career afterwards. So working at the state level initially under the Patrick administration, I was, like I said earlier, in the Community Innovation Challenge Grant program, meaning there was two of us. So me and someone else were implementing this program. And one of the sort of prides, although there was a lot of standout accomplishments, one of them was the Crosstown Connect program, which I know is especially important to Maynard. To get the people to go that last mile from the train station in South Acton, which I used to walk to from the other way from Acton, to get downtown to Maynard and back and forth. That's key. If people don't feel like, especially in this time when the populations, and especially the younger population, are focusing more on the urban centers like Boston and Cambridge, well, how do we make them feel like the jobs are accessible? Or how do we make developers or new tenants into Mill and Main, how do we make them feel like this is feasible? Like we can accomplish our dream of having a good workforce that maybe they don't want to live in Maynard, but they want to come to Maynard every day and they find it easy. It's not a burden for them to get all the way out to Maynard. That's key. And I'm still involved with Crosstown Connect. I go to the regular meetings now as a representative of Westford. Westford obviously doesn't have the same sort of like economic issues just because we're large enough, we don't have the same sort of demands. However, we're trying to draw the same workforce. So in that capacity, we have this week started a new shuttle to go from the Littleton train station all along the Route 110 corridor, which is IBM's in Littleton, all the way up to Juniper Networks and just same street, you're just going all the way up north. Well, that's key. I'm curious and I'm excited to see what sort of turnout we get from that, what kind of ridership we get from that, because if people feel like they don't have to drive their car to get to work, I think that's the sort of mindset that a lot of the younger workforce have these days. We just want to say it's as easy as getting on the train, get on the shuttle, and you'll be at Juniper Networks or IBM or Red Hat, and I'm sure future growth that's going to happen along that. Well, we have to apply that same sort of mentality to wherever we can in Maynard. And the shuttle's a good example of it, but so is the rail trail, which, by the way, I would plan on riding my bike as often as possible to the town hall. No, the rail trail is really exciting. And even if you're coming from out of town or if you live down the street from it, that's the sort of example of an initiative that I think the whole community needs to see in order to feel confident about the potential going forward. It's tough for them to understand the success that could happen from 129 Parker Street because it looks like dirt mounds right now. But they know that it's pretty cool to go down the street on the rail trail, and we can use that capital of that to say that, look, we provided this, we steward this project, to have a little more capital buy-in when it comes to those bigger projects. I think the administration would be key in that, to make sure that those smaller projects are smoothly run to allow for a little more confidence in the bigger projects.
So being one of our more local candidates, you seem to have more of an intimate experience, being able to patronize Maynard and its downtown and visiting it. So what do you envision for Maynard's downtown, and any thoughts on revitalization or how you could bring your skills in economic development to the table to kind of bolster our downtown?
Good question. I think I would just try to highlight and encourage what is already there. Maynard has a lot of passion and a lot of heart. I know that sounds cliche maybe, but I went to the art walk the other day. It was a beautiful day, like great weather and whatnot. But to see how many people were out and about and just sort of meeting and greeting and going into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio, I think that's what it was, to hear jazz. I thought that was a great example of a tight community that I rarely see. In fact, you might see it in some neighborhoods or certain communities in the greater Metro Boston area, but I mean, it's the further you go out, you're not going to see that level. Besides a good parade, you're not going to see people going on the street, going from shop to shop. Oh, I've never been in this store before. All right, there's a magic shop down that way. I think those are the sort of opportunities to really let Maynard shine. And that also shows me that if that many people show up and there are some empty storefronts, well, those are opportunities. If people can see that, there's that store happens to be vacant, or that store I know is moving away, well, if people are out and about already, then how do we sort of communicate that? But as well as we show the potential developers that the people are here, that they want to be more involved and they're out in the street. That's great. I love it. And it's rare, I would feel, to see that sort of level of passion in every community. Maynard has it. We just have to help sort of guide it, or at least let it come to fruition. Those empty storefronts they're not ugly. They just need to kind of get some turnaround. I've heard that there's some other issues. I need to do a little more research to find out exactly what may be preventing. But I'm excited to do that research. I really am. I want to be able to have good conversations with potential developers as well as the community to see, what do you need? What can we do?
Okay. Can you describe for us both your managerial style and your organizational strategy, and considering your response to those two questions, what town government issues would you delegate into whom?
Okay. So my management style, I think it's had to adapt to the organization or the unit that I'm in. Initially, I was with a size of, so the Marine Corps. I might throw out some terms. I'll try to translate into some size there. So I had a platoon, and the platoon, which was larger from the average platoon, was about 50 people, all males, admittedly. But that's a good amount. And although I was not having to, on a day-to-day basis, direct and give tasks to every single Marine, my job was to be in charge of my staff. And then that sort of concept of controlling a key group that would then translate my desires or the sort of the priorities from the higher command that would trickle down to the lowest level, that concept carries on no matter what size organization. So after that, one of my last jobs in the Marine Corps was doing base security down in Georgia. Well, there was more than 400 people under my command, ranging from gate guards just checking IDs as you came in, to Marines that were manning machine gun nests. I mean, so people had much different roles, but my job was to be, yes, kind of give the bigger direction, but it also to kind of be that facilitator of here's what else is happening in base. Here are the other commands, and here are the other civilian operations that's going on. How does it affect just trying to get the job done for my guys down on the post, or down on the base, guarding the submarines and whatnot. I really had a great time doing that, and I learned a lot. It's important that I had a staff of maybe 7 or 8 different officers, and by the way, most of them were significantly older than I was, because they were all prior enlisted Navy men that had gone warrant officers. So, right, no, but so that was a challenge. They came in with a significant amount of experience. No, but and the Navy's not like the Marine Corps, which also taught me a lot about mindset. Is I can't think that everyone's going to try to. No one's going to see the same problem the same way twice. So how I see the solution may not be how the rest of my staff sees the solution. But it's important to have those conversations and have the same understanding. Here's what my bigger goal is, and then let them do their job. I see the same way with the department heads. So the department heads are experts in their field, presumably. I'm not a public works director or facilities manager and whatnot. I don't need to be. I want them to be good at their job. So how do I empower them and give them the guidance they need to be successful, to provide that high level of services to the citizens that's required of them? I would get that direction from the board and from town meeting and whatnot, and then try to relay that and prioritize what work they need to do as a department. I've learned a lot throughout my career, and mostly I've learned that to be successful, you have to be a good people person. And so what works for one person may not work for the other. How you address someone needs to be individualized. And I love it. I love talking to people, and I love working closely as a team. That's I think the way if I have to sort of categorize my approach to leadership, it's through teamwork. I am one part of the bigger machine that is the administration, as are all the department heads and every employee. And I want to be able to recognize that everyone has the same goal for a successful, prosperous Maynard, and safe. Safe, you know, that kind of comes hand in hand. And I think as long as everyone's on the same page, which they generally are, then we can be successful, or at least we can be confident that we're all moving together towards those goals.
From a delegation perspective, are there any untouchable items in your mind as a leader of a municipality, or thinking back, whether it was the Marine Corps, whether it was, you know, your work with the city of Boston or in the state, you know, that you feel an executive or a leader of the department would always be doing themselves?
Oh, okay, all right. To not delegate that.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Interesting. I think accountability. So I would be accountable to the board and to town meeting to a degree, but to the board primarily. I don't think that I would expect my department heads or the employees and whatnot to have to answer to you, so to speak. You know, the buck doesn't stop here; it actually stops there. But I should be accountable and should be right. I should be able to answer for the actions of my departments, or at least I shouldn't be able to say that, oh, don't look at me, or it's that guy over there. No, we're on the same team, and as the leader of that team, I need to be able to stand up and take ownership of that team. Right. Hopefully, issues are sort of like understood, or not to say completely handled, because there will be, I'm sure, sort of negative sort of aspects or whatever situations that have to come up, and I'll do it the best I can. And if it has to come to you, I will. But right, I think that's key, is to be accountable, and I wouldn't want someone else to take ownership of something that should be the role of the town administrator.
Well, let's flip that a little bit, because when Terrence asked the question, your mind went to things that you would delegate. At least I think so.
Oh, I'm
Because then
sorry.
you said, oh, I want to hear things, okay, that I want to hear, okay, what do you think you might delegate?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, I'm flipping the
Oh.
question. You didn't do anything wrong.
Inversely, I get
Yeah.
it. All right. What would I delegate? That's a good question. A lot. So my job is to administrate or to execute the policies of the board. As I said before, I am not the one plowing the streets, or I am not the one necessarily getting dirty. I will probably look like this every day. So although I will try to get out in the streets as much as I can, or do a ride along as whenever I'm able to, right, I want people to do their jobs, and I want to be able to empower those people to do so. And if they tell me it's, you know, their equipment is failing, or if they come up with good ideas or alternatives to the way we've been doing things, I want to hear those. And I want to be able to let those people be the best at whatever we need them to be. Police officers or firemen or DPW workers, I want them to be good at their job. And right, I don't want to exactly tell them what to do, because I hope that they know exactly what to do.
Would you be the type of person that would have an open door policy for your people under you and also for residents? And if so, what would that look like? How would you control it?
That's a good question. I think there is a little bit of separation between the open door policy as it pertains to employees and then differently for the community. I'll tell you, I'll explain that. So I don't want anything to be secret or to be held, you know, like I don't want to withhold any information from the department heads. So let's say there's whether it be a patrolman or a firefighter or someone, I want them to be able to feel comfortable with talking with me, but I also might ask, did you talk with the chief? Or, you know, like, have you talked with Aaron, the DPW? I want to make sure that people are informed. I don't want anyone to be surprised. Now, they may say, well, the issue is with chief. So be it. Then you can talk to me, and then we'll try to figure out the best route of communication and moving forward and whatnot. But no, I don't want anyone to feel, in fact, throughout my career and throughout the jobs I've had, whenever I do site visits or go out to meet the staff, I don't want anyone to stop talking the whole time. I want to hear everything that they're doing, you know, how they think things are going, what could be improved. I don't think it's complaining. I just want to hear exactly how do they feel about stuff. Because otherwise, how would I know? I can make certain assumptions sitting up here, but if I'm not out there, if I'm not getting the feedback directly from, or how the priorities are trickling down, then I won't know otherwise. As far as the community, I want people to be able to call me. And if it's something that needs to be brought to the board, absolutely. If I feel like it's something you need to know right away, then I would address it to the board. But I want people to be able to say that, you know, like, how come this street's not getting paved? Or you know, like, I felt like, I don't know, whatever the case is. There, as in Westford, because we're about 23,000 people, I get a lot of phone calls. And it's a big range. And it's rarely complimentary, although sometimes it is. Although I would say, I don't really need compliments. I think no news is good news. So as long as people feel like they're getting to work on time and their kids are well schooled and they feel safe at home and their streets are plowed, you don't need to call. I'll take the lack of phone calls as we're doing a good job. But I don't want people to feel like they can't talk to their town administrator or any member of the departments or the staffs and whatnot. I want people to feel like they're involved. It's town meeting for a purpose. We have a direct democracy here in New England. We need to embrace that. People have a say, and I don't want anyone to ever feel unwelcome or unheard at the government, you know, by us.
So the next question is, actually, you just made the point. What's your history and experience with the town meeting form of government?
Mm-hmm. So I've been to a number of town meetings, sitting on both sides, so to speak. So as a resident of Acton, I go to Acton's town meetings. I'm also a member of Acton's Community Preservation Committee, so I've had to be up front. That's how they do it in Acton. They have the whole committee go down, sit in front to be answerable to the people, so to speak. Although it's just the chairman that spoke, it's interesting to sit up front and then be able to show this is how we think your money should be spent. As well as in Westford. So in Westford, I sit up right up front. I sit next to the town manager, the town council, the finance committee, who I particularly like to sit next to because they whisper a lot. But that's a fascinating opportunity to see just how the town is run. I did attend Maynard's town meeting. That was a very interesting experience. It was, you know, like, I thought it was a pretty good turnout. I don't know what the history is for the turnout at town meeting, but considering, you know, like, you're only 11,000 people and whatnot, or I don't know how many voters that is, but I thought it was not quite a full auditorium, but getting there. And people had a lot of good questions. Town meeting is an interesting beast. We learned in policy school that there has to be a good policy window to be successful in your policy. As you know, most of the articles passed, but not all. And I think town meeting kind of allows us the opportunity to see, you know, how we're doing with certain approaches in government. Communication is key. If we feel like people aren't understanding what we're trying to ask them, we need to take that on. We need to sort of like do a little self-evaluation of where did we go wrong? How come people didn't see it the way we see it? That's tough. It's tough, and you don't want it to come to a head there on town meeting floor. But sometimes it does, and sometimes you cannot foresee the questions that you're going to get. We've had things go every sort of which way in Westford, and Westford has some long town meetings. But that's good. I think people should have a voice, and if it seems like people are asking a lot of questions that seem a little too obvious to the people sitting up front, we need to think about why that is. Why are people asking about this or that we thought we've addressed months and months and months ago? It's all about communication, and if people need to feel like their vote is, if people really appreciate that they have a strong vote here in New England, and they cannot feel disenfranchised because they don't know about the budget, or they don't know about what's being talked about, or that's the first time they heard about this or that, that's on us.
Any follow-up, anybody?
So you like town meeting format government?
Do I like town?
Sounds like.
I appreciate it.
He just liked the meetings, he didn't say like the process.
Yeah, the evil you know.
I didn't grow up with town. I'm from the South, and it's all county-based, and it's all kind of new. I don't know. It's interesting. It really does work. It's. I don't mean to say it's an old system, but it really has a lot of advantages. It's just fascinating, and it has to be done like any other government procedure. If you don't do it right, it's not going to work out the way you want it to.
Do you have any prior experience negotiating collective bargaining agreements? And if so, how do you perceive the relationship between labor and management? And how does that perception help you to attain the best agreement for all parties?
So although I don't have direct experience, I've not had to sit at a table, to do negotiations over collective bargaining agreements and whatnot. I've been on the receiving end, so to speak. So at the state level, on the governor's budget team, specifically my accounts were over public safety and security, so that included the state police, who have a very strong, the State Police Association of Massachusetts, SPAM, they have a very strong and important union. Throughout those negotiations, especially at the state level, I was not sitting at the table when it came to those negotiations and as they occurred year to year. But I would get the results, and we would have to figure out how we were going to pay for this or that, or how manning hours may be affected, capital, which I also had oversight of, that would also influence those negotiations, because if we can't afford that many more vehicles, like the cruisers, if we can't buy as many cruisers as they want, how's that going to influence their staffing? Or getting the troopers to the troop, to their offices in order to pick up another cruiser, because they couldn't take one home, as they typically do. So what I have found is honesty is key. So if we are going into negotiations trying to hold some cards, or if we're trying to just see what the other person's going to play first, that's one tactic. But I have found that if we are fair and honest, and if we're trying to make sure that they can feel the trust and confidence of what we're telling them, we're not trying to surprise anyone. The budget is the budget, and it's all public. So if we're being presented some sort of aspects of the negotiation that we're not going to be able to be agreeable to, it's not because we don't appreciate the work of the firemen or the police or the school, or we're not. It's because it's just we only have so many resources, and we need to be forthright with that. That way they feel that we're we're a good player in that game. It's tricky, and I look forward to the day when I can have those cross-table discussions. In the meantime, I've been schooling myself as best I can, as well as going to more formal education. I recently attended the Massachusetts Municipal Personnel Association's training for HR, and that's just, it didn't cover everything, but it's good to go to as many of those formal trainings as I possibly can, as well as reach out to people who are very good at this. My current town manager, Jody Ross, she's been in the game a long time, and she is known as a very successful town and manager. Why would I not call her if I had some questions about this or that when it came to negotiations? Or I asked my labor council. There are people who spent their entire lives to study these intricacies of successful negotiations. I want to make sure that I have those relationships and use that experience to my advantage.
Any follow-up?
I think you answered this to some degree, but you mentioned you would use Labor Council. Would you anticipate you exclusively being the negotiator for the town of Maynard? Or would you have a subsidiary or, partner? And
Wow, that's a good question. Maybe initially I would expect myself to be at the table, but I would have to sort of assess the situation to see if what sort of scale or sort of the questions that are coming out. If I need assistance, I will certainly ask for it. That's a good question, but I think it probably depends on the level of negotiations, the complexity of it. But no, I won't hide away from getting sage advice from anyone or more expert advice. No, but I also, at the same time, I also wouldn't want to skirt my responsibilities. Like if I'm responsible to you providing a budget and giving you a fair and sound collective bargaining agreement, then I should be at the table and I should be able to be answerable to those demands.
Okay. Do you have any experience in your career obtaining grants from municipalities, either through the state, federal, or any other source?
Right, so grants are key. I was fortunate enough to work on a grant program at the state level with the Community Innovation Challenge grant. And I had a great time because what it allowed me is to see is what all these communities throughout the Commonwealth were trying to accomplish. And they needed money to do it. At the time in particular, we were trying to encourage regionalization, which is especially important the further west you go in the state. A lot of small towns can't afford all the same level of services. They need to rely on each other. We were trying to provide a little bit of that capital, a little bit of that seed money to get those programs going. So I would get over 100 applications for the grants every year and do an assessment of those to analyze this is what they're trying to accomplish, this is how much money they need, this is the level of results they expect. And then we would have to do follow through with those programs. So we would visit the towns if able to, but we would have to collect all those reports because there was quarterly and annual reports that we'd have to get, as well as, in conclusion. And that allowed me to see how do these different towns approach grants, or what do they try to do, and how can I work with them to get it done? And I have found that now, being on the other side, if we have any questions about grants, I just call the state. So whether it be the Mass Office of Disability, who's recently started a new sort of like grant initiative and whatnot, we just called them, and there's just people down down in Beacon Hill or at the state house or wherever, and ask them what they want, or ask them what their best practices are. Grants are key, but they shouldn't be something that is seen as too burdensome or unachievable and whatnot. And it seems like Maynard has done a great job of sort of identifying and going after all those grants. And I'd like to continue that and see what other kind of grants. On a regular basis, the state is, and at the national level, are sort of providing or presenting new grant opportunities. We should take advantage of those, as well as capitalize on the grants we've already been given, such as the Green Communities program or whichever, something that we can kind of look at and then build off of. We should do so. We should always be moving forward with those grants and seeing what we can get from it.
Do you, in your experience, do you see a reduction in the amount of money that both federal and state are providing for grants? And is it substantial, or is it just as more competition, or what's your point of view, if you even have one on that?
I don't think, so the Baker administration is specifically came in trying to emphasize local level government. So they, if anything, we were not supposed to do anything that could detract or remove sort of like that need of money at the local level beyond what they were getting, whether through Chapter 90 or the other sort of state aid. If we could do more, and I know it's called the Community Compact Program now, but if we could do more focused, targeted funding, that's what we were doing. And I don't foresee that diminishing in the near future. State's doing well. Revenue seems to be going up. I'm not following on a regular basis on a day-to-day thing, but unemployment is down, and I think I would be shocked if we didn't see at least a continuous or I don't know what level of growth we would see in the grant opportunities or the amount of money coming in, but I think it's important to have good partnerships with our legislators, which I know you have with Representative Hogan and Senator Eldridge, who lives down the street from me, by the way. But to have those relationships, to have an understanding as what's coming down the line, what can we expect, or what more can we do to show our need, how can we market ourselves as a community or amongst communities to be a more viable candidate for those funds.
So do you feel that more communities are taking advantage of grants than before? Here's my impression looking in.
Sure.
It seems to be because revenue is shrinking in most municipalities, we're struggling to find money. My purview is that more towns are making a more of a focus for the departments to search out every grant, more so than ever before. And in fact, if you look at a lot of the job postings for people, a lot has to do with, do you have experience with grants and so on and so forth. So it would lead me to believe that more towns are discovering there's opportunities to grab this money, and they're looking for people who can help them get it.
I think that's true, but I don't think it's because there's more of a need. Although as you go out west, the populations are going down and whatnot, they're going to need more funding or more funding opportunities. But I think in general, let's say there is the same amount of grants there was the year before or over the past couple of years, but I think it's more accessible. So this administration at the state level has been, I think, doing a good job of making sure that people know that this is the website you can go to find about these grants. So, or this is how you can apply, whether it be through Combis, which is like their state grant and procurement program and whatnot, but also making sure everything is available information-wise online. So maybe a grant has always been in existence, but people may not have known about it to the level that they do now. But that also means, as you said, the competition goes up. So I'm not sure. I've not looked at the numbers to see how many more grants there have been like throughout the years, but I would certainly expect that people know about it more. And people it's easier to apply because they make it easier to apply, which just means we're going to have to be that much more marketable, which I think we can do through the same sort of venues. If we can show through our website or through social media that this is the sort of town we are, and look what we can do with what little we have, and guess how much more we can do if you provide us that support, that's the approach we should take.
Well, along those lines, do you think your experience with handling grants and with the Commonwealth puts you in a position maybe above some of the other candidates to be able to secure more grants, or at least?
I don't know the other candidates, but I would like to think I do, and that's because I have a level of comfort that maybe they don't have. So I worked at the state. I on a daily basis went across the street. So I worked at the State House, but the large state government building is right behind it. So anyways, I know that they're just people that I used to be working with on a daily basis. I will call them as much as I'll have to, to find out, what's the status of this grant? When's the deadline going to come due? Can you let me know what you think about this? Can you do a quick read through of this draft? You have to make those calls. You cannot think that they are so lofty and above us that they're inaccessible. They want to make those calls because they want their grant to be successful. They also have to have reporting measures, and they want good grants, and we should find out what those good grants are.
Thank you.
Improved communication with the Board of Selectmen, multiple department heads, and the citizens of Maynard in general have been a priority at the Board of Selectmen's annual goal-setting meetings for the past few years. If you saw communication as a shortcoming, how would you improve the same?
Communication amongst, like at all levels? I'm sorry, could you clarify?
So communication in Maynard has been, improving communication has been a problem through both the board, the department heads, and the citizens of Maynard with the town administrator. Those are goals we've set every year to improve those types of communications. So how would you handle those, improving those three communications to the board, department heads, and then to people in general? You've touched on some of it, so.
Sure. Well, there's a level of proximity that the town administrator has with the Board of Selectmen, so there's advantages to that I wouldn't have necessarily with the greater public. So I would hope, as I said initially, that I would try to identify what is the best avenue for communication or method amongst the board, as well as with department heads. I'm not trying to take away too much time with the department heads, but I want to make sure that I know what they're up to and they know what I need them to do and whatnot. Improving communication is key. I have found that any drama has occurred throughout the organizations I've been a member of because there's a lack of communication. And whether it be people aren't telling, like other people what they're doing or we need to know it, or they just feel like they don't know. That can cause tension, and that can cause stress that's unnecessary and easily avoidable if we just get the word out. So I like a lot of the initiatives that Andrew has presented, like giving you the regular reports and whatnot. I don't know how digestible that is to the greater public, though. And I found that in Westford in particular, and in other communities, we really try to capitalize on the social media capabilities that we have. So a good website's one aspect, a good Facebook group is another aspect. I don't know if you have a Twitter account, but that might be something else. Jody Ross, the town manager in Westford, also has a manager's newsletter that goes out monthly, although I haven't seen the readership numbers. I don't know how many people actually click on that or pick it up from town hall. But no one could ever say that we're not trying, that we're trying to get the word out as much as possible. I post many times a week onto the town website to try to tell people about, water restrictions or This came up the other day. The water department was getting reports that there was a private solicitor leaving pamphlets on people's front steps to say, I can't remember what it was, but something about saving water or something like that, whatever the case is. But people were calling the town water department to ask about this particular program that had nothing to do with the town. So we posted it, and I haven't gotten any phone calls. I'd be curious to know if the water department's getting just as many phone calls. But if we don't take advantage of the communication platforms that we have, then we're failing. We need to try as much as we can to get the word out, and whether that be good relationships with the local media or a good Facebook page. However eyeballs are going there, we need to find out, and that's how we need to get the word out.
Okay. Any other questions, any follow-up? No? Okay, so the last two questions are kind of we've rolled them into one, but please tell us one thing about yourself that we would not know by reading your resume or by, you're taking part in this interview, like a Google fact we might find if we looked that way, and then if you have any closing statements you'd like to make or any questions you have for us as a board or a group or individuals, feel free to ask those as well.
Or I always say, it's like the fact you hope Google doesn't have.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
The Google fact.
The un-Google fact.
Google. Oh, well. Okay, sure. So this summer I'm trying to have a little more of a green thumb, and I grew up mowing lawns and whatnot, but that was kind of the extent of my landscaping. So my wife is in charge of vegetables and the sort of like produce and she has a beautiful vegetable garden, but I'm in charge of beautification for the Johnson household. So I took advantage of the Acton Water District's rain barrel program. So I purchased 2 rain barrels from them, and it took me a couple of weekends because we also have a toddler, so shopping is not easy, but I was able to put them up and establish some rain barrels and get the rain coming from the roof, which my wife, I don't know how she feels about it, but I'm excited about it. And, no, I think that I'm very proud of that for a number of reasons. Conserve some water, sustainability aspects to it, sense of accomplishment and whatnot, but also I took advantage of what the town was providing. So I got the email notification from the water department or the town email, however I found out. And I said, yeah, I can buy some water barrels. It looked pretty easy. And when I happened to be at the water district, I asked them to show me theirs so I could see what it looked like, and they were happy to show me. So I did it. Let's see if it works. It rained a lot earlier this week, and I filled it up pretty quick. I don't think you would Google that and find it unless you could, like,
Probably not.
Google Earth the side of my house.
We had an accordion player the other night, so.
So we'll see. We'll see. It's been raining enough. I haven't had to use it. Fortunately, I got 2, because it might be a long drought, as it has been in the past couple summers. No, home improvement's one thing. Things break all the time, but at least that I can say that I have actually improved my house. Yeah, but with a toddler and a growing family, the weekends are not mine. So.
Okay. Any questions for us?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. That was only the first part of your question. I want to keep it too short. It's getting pretty late, so I'm sure you've gotten a lot of good questions. How about this? What sort of character traits would you look or would you expect a town administrator to have to be successful in the town's current challenges? And I would like to hear from all of you. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'll start with my former profession, diplomat.
That's great. Sure.
As an attribute. I mean, I think for everything that we've kind of discussed in some of the questions, there's not easy answers, but there's going to be a need to retain open communication channels.
Absolutely.
Even as you're negotiating through not everyone getting what they want.
Absolutely.
I think it's just being honest and true to yourself and to your profession as a town administrator. And with, from my perspective, it's all about communication with this 5-member board,
Right.
as well as with the community. So that is, from my perspective, the key to a successful town administrator.
Sure.
Melissa?
I'm gonna say, it's always hard going last.
That's why I didn't want to put you at the back of the bus anymore.
I appreciate it. I agree with Cheryl and David. I think being collaborative is really important in this town and being able to work with the different personalities and departments, and especially when there's tension, like the school committee issues that come up during
Right.
budgetary season. So I think, that's a key aspect of working as a town administrator.
Sure.
Mr. Donovan.
Guys can rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, go ahead.
The chairman's prerogative, he's holding last.
I would say, be visible. Probably to, like, David's point about being a proponent for the town and stuff, and being, not just for the staff and but the residents, but being out there and being visible.
Okay.
Being passionate about the town, as you're indicating you really are, and not just being in the office all the time.
Right.
And taking meetings with department heads, which is extremely important,
Right.
and meeting your staff, but actually getting out into the neighborhoods and actually seeing the rest of what Maynard has to offer.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman?
It's my turn? Oh. Leader. Town of Maynard needs a leader. In a lot of the things you talk about, platoons and the different things you've done in your military career and the other parts of your career. That's what the town needs. We're looking for a leader, and a leader is somebody that, they don't just tell you what to do, they show you how to do it. If you don't know, they lead you from the order to the end of the process.
Absolutely.
So we need someone to lead, and not only in this building and in the DPW and in the cemeteries, but we need someone to lead our citizens. When someone has a question, if you're the leader, you're the guy in charge, you answer the question. If you don't know, if the leader doesn't know the question, a good leader goes and finds the answer. And then goes back and leads the process again. So that's what we need is leadership. And that's really the most important thing. And, by definition, town administrator is the leader. So that's it, leadership along with the other four traits that my colleagues mentioned, and we'd be good if we had that.
No,
We'd be real good.
I appreciate that, and I would strive to embody those every day. And I don't want to say thank you for having me again, and thank you for the selectmen that are moving on, so to speak, that are not going to be coming on. And congratulations to those that will be coming on board. I look forward to working with all of you. You continue to live in town, I would hope. And
Well, one of us will.
oh, really? Well, so be
The
it.
other skedaddling.
But to be
Seattling.
that's
Skedaddling, that's right.
either way, it's But I'm sure you would be fond of Maynard either way.
I
So
grew up here, so
that's great, and so I would want to have a successful and prosperous
I'll
town
be
for
keeping
you.
an eye on it.
Yeah. No, I look forward to the board, to the new board and the new makeup, new relationships building on both ends. It'd be exciting.
We certainly appreciate you taking an interest in the position, taking the time tonight and the other times that you have been a part of the process. We all appreciate the fact that you've put that much time into it. And as Melissa stated earlier, the 100-day plan was very impressive.
Oh, great.
And so we
Very
appreciate
fluid,
that as
though.
well. Yep.
That's great.
And you'll probably be
You
home,
gotta have
you'll
one.
probably be home
Things in it
before
can
most of us
change, but you
too.
have to have one.
It was like first
But
line.
we do appreciate it, and we will be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
But before we go, you're all set. But before we go, so we are gonna schedule, we talked about it, a meeting for a regular selectmen's meeting on June 26th, because the 19th agenda is overloaded, and we need to finish up a few small things before we move into the next month, and
Next fiscal year.
that's it. And we'll have a big fiesta out in the parking lot.
And that's mainly because both Terrence and I can both be here, so.
That's right, yeah.
I will load that in the system on Monday.
Yeah.
I am out tomorrow.
It's okay.
I have a lot of
Can we
hours.
give it to
in-
Steph?
No, no,
There's
no.
plenty of time to post
Yeah,
it, so
I have a
not worried.
funeral and I'm
No, so,
going to Connecticut.
Trade it.
just, if you would, right?
Yeah.
Just email me, me, Steph, and Andrew, and then we'll know, and we'll be good.
Okay.
And then I'll look at the agendas and just kind of pair them out to see, because there's a few of those things we've added for the 19th and there's a few things that we've added to July 17th that really should be done before that too, so
Correct.
we'll work that all out.
It's gonna
Enjoy
be
your time,
amazing.
enjoy your time away.
I'm staying on my daughter's deck.
In Old Orchard?
No.
Oh, Connecticut.
Are you going up there?
No,
Yeah.
my house is available in Maine if somebody.
No, my kid was asking me where to play golf in Old Orchard this morning.
I do the rest.
He might go there. He had a list, I'm like, dude,
Motion to adjourn.
yes, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Thanks, Greg.
I also have Comments
Thank
on
you.
my reference